Washington state, the most trade-dependent state in the country.
Almost 1 out of every 3 jobs, directly or indirectly, depends on selling our made or grown, produced in Washington products overseas.
But with trade tensions escalating and key deals not yet resolved,
we need to get this settled as soon as possible. The longer that it takes, the more of an impact that it's going to have.
Uncertainty is putting trade-dependent industries from aerospace to agriculture in limbo.
Tariffs have had a really challenging and detrimental impact on our state.
On trade, when you stand still, you fall behind. And what we're seeing around the world today is that as other countries move forward with their own trade agreements, American industry and American farmers can get cut out.
From west side seaports to east side wheat fields, all kinds of Washington state industries are feeling the impact.
As a manufacturer, we've seen steel increases, price increases in between 15 to 20%.
And wondering when a trade deal will bring some certainty.
I think free trade is really what all the growers would really like.
What will happen to the state's exports as tariffs abroad increase?
If you can't get into the partnership and into the place where you need to go, you go find where you can. And that will hurt Washington jobs, it will hurt Washington local economies and every community in the state.
And is a perfect deal out of reach?
I think it's very complicated because what's good for software may not be good for aluminum, may not be good for airplanes or cherries.
If Microsoft or Amazon want to have a partner, that's their business, but they shouldn't be forced to.
As trade talks intensify in D.C., we'll explore the impacts on Washington state.
It's getting pretty painful at this point, and so I think there's going to be increasing pressure on the administration to deliver a positive deal.
And talk to congressional leaders and trade experts in Washington, D.C. about what should happen next.
From the capital of Washington state
to the capital of the United States, this is Washington to Washington. Hello and welcome to Washington to Washington. I'm Natalie Brand in Washington, D.C., where negotiations continue on multiple fronts and trade tensions continue to be felt nationwide.
And I'm Jennifer Huntley in Washington state. Behind me is the Port of Tacoma. It is part of the Northwest Seaport Alliance, a marine cargo partnership that includes the Port of Seattle. The Seaport Alliance is the 4th largest container gateway in North America, with millions of containers leaving here and headed to Asia to meet their growing needs. That means billions in revenue for Washington state and thousands of jobs. The business at these ports is just one reason why a battle over trade tariffs is so critical to our state. In fact, we spoke with the president of the Washington Council on International Trade recently about how the decline in soy exports has affected Washington, even though it isn't grown here.
Seattle and the Northwest Seaport Alliance are incredible gateways to other parts of the world. And so Washington state doesn't grow any soy, yet we are the 2nd largest soy exporter in the United States. So as we know, soy has really declined. Soy production in the U.S. or soy exports has really declined, and Washington state is caught up in that from a freight mobility perspective of moving goods and services around the world.
We will have more on the impact here throughout this episode. But first, let's head back to Washington, D.C. and Natalie.
Jennifer, let's start with what many consider a trade war with China. While tensions escalated a few weeks ago, the tariff tit-for-tat actually started last year.
I am taking action to impose safeguard tariffs.
In the summer of 2018, President Trump imposed tariffs or a tax on imports on more than $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. The administration says the move was made in response to China's unfair trade practices, including intellectual property theft. China retaliated by slapping tariffs on U.S.-made products, including soybeans, dairy, and pork. Let's fast forward to now. May of this year, negotiations with China stalled after the Trump administration said China's trade team backtracked on some of the proposed reforms. As a result, the president made good on his threat to hike tariffs on the $200 billion worth of Chinese goods from 10 to 25%, impacting everything from telecommunications and computer parts to seafood and textiles.
I think it's going to turn out extremely well. We're in a very strong position. We are the piggy bank that everybody likes to take advantage of or take from, and we can't let that happen anymore.
Once again, China responded with a retaliatory tariff hike of its own on $60 billion worth of U.S. goods. Additionally, the U.S. Trade Representative has said the administration is preparing to move forward with plans to consider tariffs on an additional $325 billion worth of Chinese goods. While the Trump administration is using the tariffs as a tool to try and negotiate a better deal, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce argues businesses and consumers are paying the price.
These tariffs are harming the competitiveness of American businesses. Those jobs depend on the flow of trade, and some of them have been interrupted because of those tariffs. And we've seen a strategy where tariffs have been imposed on our closest allies and best customers, and that's been especially problematic.
John Murphy of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is referencing a separate batch of tariffs imposed on foreign steel and aluminum, impacting major trade partners such as Canada, Mexico, and the EU, which also responded with retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. A major new development on this front happened on May 17th. The Trump administration announced an agreement with Canada and Mexico to lift the tariffs, bringing an end to the year-long standoff.
So it was a barrier to our farmers being able to do business with them, to our farmers being able to sell product in there. So that deal is going to be a fantastic deal for our country, and hopefully Congress will approve the USMCA quickly.
Democratic Congresswoman Susan DelBene of Washington's 1st District sits on the Ways and Means Committee and Trade Subcommittee. Here's her take on the impact to date.
Tariffs have had a really challenging and detrimental impact on our state. The 232 tariffs, which are the steel and aluminum tariffs that were put in place, caused retaliation against our farmers. I have one of the few aluminum smelters left in the country up in Ferndale, in the northern part of my district, right by the border. 232 tariffs supposedly were supposed to help domestic producers. They haven't been helping domestic producers. They have integrated supply chains. So really, that hasn't helped who it was intended to help on the aluminum side, for example, and it hasn't helped our farmers. It's hurt them greatly.
I recognize that this is painful in the short term, and I'm hearing from a number of people in Washington state. Clearly, we are the most trade-dependent state in the country, so this is very important. I applaud the president, though, for being tough on China. That as you think over a longer term and our goal of having free and fair trade and how important that is.
Republican Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rodgers of Washington's 5th District in the eastern part of the state represents some of the highest wheat-producing counties in the nation.
There is a real economic impact. I've certainly heard concerns from farmers, and they are impressing upon me the importance of us taking action soon.
Even farmers who support the president are feeling the pain and economic strain of uncertainty.
What they tell me is that they appreciate that this is happening because unfair trade practices also hurt them. But they also are encouraging me to make sure that the administration knows that this needs to be settled sooner rather than later.
Uncertainty isn't good for economy. It isn't good for the ability for folks to make long-term decisions. So farmers have a lot of concerns about the ongoing uncertainty. You can lose a customer very quickly, but regaining that market share over the long run could take years. And our farmers are not in a position where they can wait years to get that market share back.
Jennifer, that's something I've heard time and time again from farmers, business owners, and trade experts, concern about losing market share. As you know, China is Washington's largest trading partner. I know you've been looking into the impact to local companies. What have you found?
Natalie, here in Washington state, 40% of jobs are tied to international trade. This includes everything from aerospace to agriculture to retail, manufacturing, technology, and science. China continues to be the largest foreign market for products produced in Washington state. In fact, more than $14.2 billion in Washington state exports headed to China in 2018. Because of our reliance on trade with China, the trade war has impacted many industries here. We spoke with 2 companies that do business overseas to get a sense of how they've been impacted and what they believe government officials should do now to help companies get back on track with their trading partners.
That is seed bed prep. So if you're going to plant like a new orchard, or if you're going to plant like a new alfalfa or hay, then they'll use this to kind of smooth out the ground.
Since the late 1800s and 5 generations strong, Rankin Equipment Company in the Yakima Valley has been selling farm equipment. First as a local wholesale distributor in the Pacific Northwest, eventually expanding to manufacture products that are sold throughout the U.S., Asia, and Australia.
Some of our product could be like as small as a 25-gallon spot sprayer for a weekend farmer up to a 30-foot commercial hay rake. So our customers can be the weekend farmer or a large commercial farm like an apple grower.
In March of 2018, President Trump increased steel tariffs, and by July of that year, Canada imposed matching retaliatory tariffs. These impacted Rankin Equipment since steel is a major part of its machinery.
As a manufacturer, we've seen steel price increases in between 15 to 20%. So that added cost we have to add on to the price of our products. In the end, that has affected us, so it makes us less competitive in the global market because we have to charge more.
Rankin says his company has been able to adapt and absorb some of the price increases and is still doing business in Asia and with Canada, even if this year is less profitable than in the past.
We've had to diversify as far as the suppliers go, so we're looking for suppliers in different markets now, potentially of other countries.
2015 is the year when apples were able to freely flow into China. Since then, they've had about 2.5 million or so boxes, and that's decreased in the recent year.
It's a similar story for Doug Gibson, the assistant manager of Mount Adams Fruit. Mount Adams is a pear, apple, and cherry packer and grower along the Columbia River. They also have some orchards in Yakima and contracts with Yakima growers. They export their fruit worldwide.
Changes by variety, but mostly domestic, as well as Mexico, Canada, and Asia. We do have some exports to Australia and other smaller countries for our cherry season.
Gibson says the cherry market as a whole in Washington state has seen decreases in trade with China.
The market as a whole in 2018 was about 1.7. In the year before, it was 3.2 million boxes. So there was a significant decrease in boxes shipped to China for cherries.
It's already a challenging market.
Most important factors for trade are really the price and quality, and our ability to hit the market at the right time with the right variety.
For optimal freshness, the time frame for picking in Washington state to selling in China is typically just a 3-day turnaround. But it's not just tariffs on fruit that are impacting orchardists. Believe it or not, steel tariffs play a part too.
We put steel trellis in for a lot of our more modern orchards, and that steel increase affected the pricing that flowed through to us from our suppliers quite a bit.
So we're here with the vital action support for the American farmers.
In late May, Trump announced $16 billion in additional aid to farmers hurt by the tariffs. And cherry growers in particular got a boost on the same day when the Senate passed a bill that would give more cherry farmers in Washington state the ability to apply for financial assistance. But Gibson says relief from the feds isn't a permanent fix.
Relief is nice, but it has longer lasting effects with our ability to sell into different markets, and other countries may come in, and so it's solving this and figuring out a better way to go forward.
So what do distributors like Gibson and Rankin want from the federal government?
I think free trade is really what all the growers would really like. Being able to sell our products without tariffs that impact our pricing makes it an even playing field.
A good deal is going to work good for both sides, so it's going to benefit both the manufacturers here in the U.S. and is also going to help the people overseas as well. So I think it's going to be a multilateral trade deal that's beneficial for both.
While the drama unfolds in D.C. and overseas, and a new trade deal remains up in the air, Washington state businesses have an important message for the president and Congress.
Manufacturing is not dead in the U.S. Like if you're looking at this building here, we're still making product, we're still selling product overseas. Just because China has become a huge superpower over the last 15 to 20 years on the manufacturing front, people still do crave the American products. And I think that's pretty important to know, that just because Maybe our prices are not the cheapest, we still make quality, innovative goods.
Both Chris Rankin and Doug Gibson believe that business will happen regardless of tariffs or other restrictions put in place that make international trade difficult. They say while they wait for a good trade deal, they are hopeful, but are also reaching out to other markets in the meantime. Natalie?
Thanks, Jennifer. Still ahead, a special interview with former Washington Governor Gary Locke, who also served as ambassador to China. His view on negotiations between the world's two largest economies, plus why he's pushing for the new updated agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Welcome back from Washington, D.C. Former Washington Governor Gary Locke offers a very unique perspective on the current trade negotiations, having also served as ambassador to China and Commerce Secretary under the Obama administration. He's now also an honorary co-chair of a bipartisan group of trade associations, businesses, and advocates working to push for the new trade agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, known as USMCA. Locke calls it NAFTA 2.0.
It's been several decades since NAFTA was first drafted and approved, but since then our economy has changed dramatically in terms of e-commerce, so many products from music and content delivered electronically, digitally. And so we really need to, tinker, update, revise original NAFTA to take into account not only the new economy, but also just some of the defects and some of the problems that have occurred to really make sure that it's fair to all sides, both to American workers, American companies, American consumers, but also Canadian interest and Mexican interest. This NAFTA 2.0 clearly is better than the existing agreement drafted under the Clinton administration, and I very much support it, even though I disagree so much with President Trump on virtually any other issue. But this agreement is certainly much better than what he was originally proposing, which was to completely rip up NAFTA. Again, our economies have changed since the 20, 30 years when NAFTA was first approved and drafted. So many things now are done using e-commerce, and that really didn't exist when the original NAFTA was drafted.
Among some of the biggest updates, the USMCA agreement includes a new intellectual property and digital chapter. It also includes new labor provisions. For example, around 40% of car parts have to be made by workers who earn at least $16 an hour in coming years. And it includes increased access for U.S. farmers to the Canadian dairy market.
This really means that we'll be able to export more produced, grown in Washington products and services, dairy, poultry, even wine. Our Washington wines have been discriminated against. A lot of it cannot even be on the shelves in various parts of Canada.
While the agreement was signed by the three countries' leaders in November of 2018, it still needs to be passed by Congress.
It is very important that it happens this year. It is going to require Republicans and Democrats voting for USMCA. And I'm on the whip team. We're talking to members right now. We have some Democrats that have publicly said that they will support this agreement, especially with the labor reforms now that Mexico has passed. We need to get more of those Democrats to get on board.
Congresswoman McMorris Rodgers is on the whip team trying to get the votes to get the deal through. But House Democrats have expressed concerns ranging from labor to environmental to enforcement.
There are many issues that still are unresolved in terms of exactly how agreement would be enforced. There are concerns around labor, the environment, around biologics. And so for a deal to move forward, those issues have to be addressed. The ambassador is going to have to listen to members, address those concerns before a deal is going to move forward through Congress.
There is a sense of urgency. We need to get this settled as soon as possible. The longer that it takes, the more of an impact that it's going to have on agriculture, on manufacturing, on tech and innovation in Washington state. And we are the most trade-dependent state in the country, so our economy is tied to trade. And getting USMCA passed and signed into law by August needs to happen, and then that is going to be the first step in getting some of these other trade deals negotiated and get it settled, because our manufacturers, our producers, our farmers, they need that certainty.
The timing of when USMCA gets a vote in Congress is still up in the air, since it's up to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi as to when she brings it before the House. But the recent agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico to lift tariffs is seen as a significant step that could help clear the way to move the deal forward. When we return, more of our interview with former Governor Gary Locke, his view of what a good trade deal with China looks like and the impact to local tech companies. Jennifer?
Natalie, just ahead from Washington State, we talked to two lawmakers from opposite sides of the state and the political aisle, but both have extensive backgrounds in trade.
Whether it's Asia, whether it's Mexico, the level of tariffs clearly can make our products competitive or uncompetitive very quickly.
What happens at the federal level, they have no idea how the consequences relay into different parts of the states.
What role can and should the state play in supporting businesses impacted by the volatile nature of international trade? That and more coming up. Welcome back. Over the past few years, Washington state officials have tracked how much of the state's exports were targeted by tariffs. Here's a look at some numbers from 2017. About $4 billion in Washington exports were hit with tariffs by other countries. About $1 billion of those tariffs were directed at the agricultural industry here. Given the reliance in the state on international trade, we wanted to get a sense from lawmakers about how the state can and should respond when industries here are affected.
We are probably the most trade-dependent state in America. That's very, very important to our economy.
In Olympia, Senator Mark Schessler has served in either the House or Senate since 1993 and is currently the leader of the Senate Republican caucus. Across the state in Ritzville, Washington,
The Pacific Northwest crop primarily goes to the Pacific Rim nations.
His history goes back much farther. As a fifth-generation dryland wheat farmer on land his family has been farming since the 1880s. So if you want to talk about wheat as an international commodity, Senator Schessler is a good source.
Whether it's Asia, whether it's Mexico, the level of tariffs clearly can make our products competitive or uncompetitive very quickly, along with macro issues like global supply and demand and the strength of the dollar.
Complicating things even more, Schessler says a good trade deal for one industry in our state could be a bad one for another.
And that's what makes a trade deal so complex. The president could easily do a great job for American agriculture, but we could watch our domestic aluminum, steel, software, and other industries take a horrible beating.
We're the #1 trade-dependent state. We are the 4th largest exporting state.
Representative Gail Tarleton joined the Washington State Legislature in 2013 and represents Seattle's Ballard, Magnolia, and Queen Anne neighborhoods. The big city is a far cry from the wheat fields of Schessler's eastern Washington.
I've been working in international trade issues since 1990.
But Tarleton's background provides insight into trade as well. Tarleton is a former senior defense analyst for the Pentagon and an international business director. During the Great Recession, she was a Seattle port commissioner.
I saw what happened when trade relationships and trade opportunities are basically being dismantled, realigned, and reconnected, and all of that coincided with China becoming a member of the World Trade Organization.
As for the impact of tariffs and the trade war with China today,
we usually see about a 6-month to 9-month lag, and that's why I'm really focused on what is going to happen when the next round of increase in tariffs happen, because by the time that happens, our products will have had to find a different market. Our relationship with Canada could be at real risk because we have a huge trading relationship with Canada. They're our 2nd largest trading partner for the state of Washington. Our border is hundreds of miles long, and we naturally seek the path of least resistance. So if you can't get into the partnership and into the place where you need to go, you go find where you can. And that will hurt Washington jobs, it will hurt Washington local economies and every community in this state.
The Washington State Commerce Department tracks exports out of Washington to other countries. They adjust the numbers from the U.S. government by removing exports produced in other states prior to leaving a Washington State port. In 2014, $80.2 billion of product was exported. By 2018, that number dropped to $70.4 billion, a more than 12% drop in just 4 years, an indication that tariffs are impacting exports in Washington. Do you support more congressional oversight of how and when the president imposes tariffs on trade negotiations?
Based on the gridlock we've seen in the other Washington, I don't know that we want to give too much more to Congress.
So what can and should the state do to keep consistency for those who rely on trade to do business?
We always have to have the welcome mat out. Welcome trade, welcome competition, and stay engaged. And I think it's very complicated because what's good for software may not be good for aluminum, may not be good for airplanes or cherries. So it's complicated for this or any other president.
I never view unregulated trade as the answer, but I do not believe in establishing more barriers because there are quite a few. Even though you think of the world as global, we still speak different languages, we have different systems for measuring goods. We use, different metric systems, and these are the things that people overcome to trade. But the more you create costs that are not someplace else in a global system, things follow the path of least resistance, and they'll go someplace else.
Part of what makes Washington so desirable for trade is geography and climate, the ability to grow crops and easy access to the Pacific Ocean for shipping to the Pacific Rim. Natalie?
From farmers to tech giants, Washington state businesses are closely following the latest developments, twists and turns with the ongoing trade negotiations with China. We spoke to former Governor Gary Locke, who also served as the ambassador to China under the Obama administration, about what he'd like to see in a final deal, as well as some of the key concerns of Washington businesses.
America and American companies, in fact, foreign companies and foreign governments, have had long-standing concerns about the trade and economic policies of China. China has not really lived up to its promises made when it joined the WTO. China has benefited from joining the WTO. It's been able to sell many of their products overseas, providing income to the people, and really raising hundreds of millions of Chinese people out of poverty. But we in the West, in opening up our doors to Chinese products, had expectations that they would also open up their doors to foreign business. So many sectors of the Chinese economy are off limits to any type of investment. And where investment is allowed, oftentimes let's say the American or German company cannot have more than 50% ownership of an enterprise, 49.9 or 49.8, which then means they have to have a Chinese partner. And then if they have to have a Chinese partner, they share their technology and their know-how. And that's where you have a lot of the concerns and complaints about forced transfer of technology and trade secrets. A good deal for the United States means China opening up more of its markets, allowing more foreign companies to come in without having to have a Chinese partner. Obviously, if the company wants to have a Chinese partner, it's oftentimes wise that they have a partner, but at least not a controlling, a partner who has, more than 50% or 51% of the ownership that can really call the shots. I think our tech leaders really want to know that that there are more markets open to them where they don't have to have a Chinese partner, where they don't have to share their technology with a Chinese company. Why is it that, for instance, Amazon or Microsoft have to have a partner to offer cloud computing services in China, but the Chinese tech companies don't have to have an American partner if they operate in America? Again, level playing field. If Microsoft or Amazon want to have a partner, that's their business, but they shouldn't be forced to.
While lawmakers across both sides of the aisle want a better trade deal with China that addresses the unfair trade practices, they disagree over the best strategy to get there.
China's been a bad actor. China has been duplicating our intellectual property. They have been taking our manufacturing products and stealing our intellectual property from them and selling them to other places around the world. We need to hold China accountable. So I applaud the president for doing that. And I am told that the administration is encouraged, that they believe that we are getting to a better place with China.
I do think a multilateral approach is really critical. That means these aren't just issues necessarily that the U.S. is facing. Many other countries face these same issues. And so if we're working with our allies together on an approach with China, that I think would have much more impact. Clearly, intellectual property theft, forced technology transfer, these are very, very serious issues, and we should be addressing them. And so I agree that action needs to be taken, but I do think having multilateral support would be very, very important and hopefully get us to a better outcome more quickly. So that's one piece that the administration has kind of been a go-it-alone effort, and I don't think that necessarily is the most powerful effort we could put forward.
A key point in the timeline of these trade talks could come in late June, when President Trump says he plans to meet with China's president at the G20 summit in Japan. The administration also says that China has invited the U.S. Trade Representative and Treasury Secretary to Beijing for continued negotiations, but no official talks scheduled just yet.
Natalie, here in Washington State, some of the best minds in the field of international trade got together recently for the Washington Council on International Trade's annual summit in Seattle. More than 200 experts gathered to map a path forward for business owners and farmers who are feeling the effects of this trade war. And the council had a very clear message for state leaders.
I think it's incredibly important for state and local leaders to just sort of reemphasize the important trading partners that Washington State has. You know, I think oftentimes we sort of look at trade as a U.S. to other countries, but you know, if you look about Washington State, our top trading partners include Mexico, Canada, Japan, the UK, China, of course, and just thinking about the importance of those bilateral relationships from a state perspective is really critical. And so encouraging those bilateral conversations.
We've seen how time-consuming, intense these trade negotiations can be. You're dealing with different industries, different countries and viewpoints. Add on top of that competition and politics. But at the end of the day, it's estimated nearly 40 million jobs in the U.S. are supported by international trade. That's around 1 in every 5 jobs, highlighting the urgency around these ongoing trade negotiations.
On trade, when you stand still, you fall behind. And what we're seeing around the world today is that as other countries move forward with their own trade agreements, American industry and American farmers can get cut out.
I think the message to our congressional leaders is that it's always important for Washington State to have smart trade policy. So whether it's a smart negotiation with China, advancing the USMCA, or figuring out how our agriculture community can have better market access abroad, or what the circumstances might be in which the U.S. re-engages in conversations around TPP. I think those are all important issues on the table.
Over the next few months in Washington, D.C., those conversations will continue. Meantime, here at the Port of Tacoma and other places across Washington State, those whose jobs and livelihoods depend on trade will be sending a message to the nation's capital about the big impact in this state of trade policies worldwide.
Thank you for joining us for Washington to Washington. We look forward to our continuing cross-country conversation on the critical issues in Washington State.
And talking with the people in both places who are working towards solutions. We welcome your feedback on this episode, as well as ideas for future episodes of Washington to Washington.
You can use the hashtag WA2WA and share your thoughts with us on social media. For now, from Washington, D.C., thank you so much for watching.
And from Washington State, we hope you'll join us next time on Washington to Washington.